Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. We're back on a PTCGO. I know it's been a little bit since I've done a video on PTCGO, but we are here on PTCGO. Today we're going to be looking at Arceus Inteleon, which I, for the most part, firmly believe that it is the best deck in format currently. Um, and I've been playing this deck for almost the entirety of the Brilliant Stars format. Anyway, for the past month or so, I've been playing this deck to all the online tournaments that I play in. I've been doing pretty well, getting some top 8s, a couple top 4s. Most recently, yesterday, got top 4 at late night, which, if you know, online tournaments is the biggest online tournament series, so happy about that. But I just want to go through this deck and look at it and explain it and the specific list in general, because there are a few kind of funky things about this list in general that I've been playing. But yeah, let's just go ahead and look at the Arceus Inteleon. So, the first thing you might notice about this list, it does play a lot of one-ofs. 15 one-ofs in total, mostly taken up by the supporters. There are 7 one-of supporters, 1 Sharon Scare, 1 Clara, 1 Marnie, 1 Melanie, 1 Research, 1 Raihan, and 1 Sydney. A couple of those are a little bit funny, but just like the fact that we have so many one-of supporters is honestly okay, because we do play 1 copy of Palpad as well, to get them out. And Palpad is pretty easy to do when you have the Inteleon engine. You can just maybe use a Shady Dealings Inteleon to search your deck for 2 trainer cards, get a Palpad and a Scoop Up Net, play the Palpad, shuffle in, I don't know what you might need, like a Melanie back, shuffle the Melanie in, and then Scoop Up Net the Inteleon to evolve another Sobble into a Drizzle to grab that Melanie. So Palpad really will justify all these one-of supporters, and it's even with all these being one-ofs, it's felt pretty smooth. The only thing that I maybe want another of is potentially another Marnie and potentially another boss. But other than that, honestly, all the one-of supporters have felt fine on with all the way to search them out when you need them and the Palpad. Now, starting off with the Pokemon, we do have, of course, a 4-3 Arceus V-Star line. And this is, of course, going to be using Trinity Nova, which will two-shot anything, and can do a pretty solid job of one-shotting Pokemon V as well, which is nice. Always it's nice to be able to one-shot Pokemon V. Yeah, we do 3 Colorless Energy, 200, start your deck for 3 basic energy cards, attach them to your Pokemon V any way you like. And we only play 2 Pokemon V, Arceus V and V-Star, and Crobat, so we are almost always going to be accelerating to Arceus V's and V-Stars, unless there is an odd scenario where, like, Boss Stall isn't out for your opponent to win the game, and you might want to accelerate energy onto Crobat, but that's not going to come up that often, so this will mostly be used for accelerating energies onto our Arceus V and V-Star to set them up to just, like, string attacks really, really consistently, which is something that the Arceus Inteleon deck does a really good job at, is just always having attackers set up ready to go. Now, of course, it does cost 3 colors energy, so we do get access to double turbo energy to pay. No, that's not double turbo energy. Double turbo energy, which is right here, to provide the energy. So Trinity Nova essentially costs 2 energy attachments instead of 3, which is great. Two-shotting anything in the game for 2 energy attachments has always been good, pretty much. Or 2 or less attachments, like we've seen, like Rapture, Urshifu succeed with Gale Thrust, 1 energy can, with a couple damage modifiers, 2-shot anything in the game. Zoroark for 1 energy attachment, of course has to be a DC, but could 2-shot anything in the game at the time. Goliathspot GX, a lot like Urshifu for a single basic energy that's grass, you can 2-shot anything in the game pretty much. So Arceus V-Star really kind of setting the bar in terms of Pokemon that you want to build a deck around, which is 2-shotting anything. And yeah, of course, we also have the access to this super powerful Starbirth ability that lets us search our deck for 2 cards, which we will be almost always using early game, because setting up is really important. And if you don't set up, you're not winning the game. And Starbirth lets you set up, so therefore you can win the game. If you do draw hot enough in order to not have to use Starbirth during the early turns, you are probably winning that game, because any point in the game, if your opponent does not have a path to the peak out, or you do not have a path to the peak out, we will get to that in a minute, you will have access to Starburst. Late in the game to grab out the boss that you need, or maybe a Charon's Care you need, or anything you need, you can just grab out if you don't have to use Starbirth early. And honestly, it just feels so good when you don't have to use Starbirth early. It's just, you just feel like you have so much control, and you do. You have so much control when you don't use Starbirth early. But most of the time, we are going to be using Starbirth early in the game because, as I have mentioned, setting up is very important. We do run one copy of Dunsparce, which I think is pretty mandatory right now. A lot of decks are trying to play Zapdos V. There's been some Lycanroc VMAX running around. Lucario V-Star just came out. That could see success too. So I think Dunsparce is really, really necessary right now to turn off your weakness with the Mysterious Nest. Colors Pokemon in play. Both yours and your opponents have no weakness. So this will mean that the Arceus is no longer weak to those fighting types that could potentially put a block in your path in terms of winning the game. We run one copy of Crobat V to just be able to draw up until you have 6 cards in your hand. It's really, really great to have this option when your deck does rely heavily on getting an Arceus V down turn 1. If you don't get an Arceus V down turn 1, it feels really bad, especially because this deck it can make comebacks because it will price trade favorably into a lot of decks, but still it does feel kind of bad when you don't get an Arceus V down turn 1. So having this guy as the option to fill up your hand, because sometimes you will be going to a low hand like 1 or 0 cards, pull off like a big combo with Starburst early game, like Boss KO, whatever you want. Your hand will be going kind of low when you do that, so it's also just nice to have that option of Crobat there as well. It is going to be worth noting that Crobat is a liability against a lot of decks, because VMAX decks, you can, if you play just like a VMAX and like a 4/4 VMAX line and a Crobat, you'll be okay because your opponent needs to knock out. If they knock out the Crobat, they still need to knock out 2 VMAXs, which is what you're trying to make them do anyway. So Crobat V also in a 2-prize deck. Also, you have to keep a watch out for that. That's also a reason why we do run a Collapsed Stadium as well, because that also can discard a Crobat from our bench if we really have to. One copy of Galarian Judzagoon, which I think if you're playing Arceus Inteleon, you just have to play. It's just, you have to play for the mirror. And the reason it's good in the mirror is because Arceus V-Star, when it has a double turbo energy attached, only hits 180, plus a choice belt to increase your damage by 30 to Pokemon V. You're only hitting 210, and Arceus V, as we can see here, even on our own deck, has 220 HP. So we're playing Galarian Judzagoon to hit that 220 damage threshold so we can turn to Boss Knockout and opposing Arceus V if we want to. And I've been seeing lists playing no Galarian Judzagoon, and I think that's just going to be objectively worse. I think Judzagoon is totally worth the spot. It's useful in other matchups too, like Suicune Ludicolo. If you hit for 180, Suicune does 210 HP, so a quick shooting plus a single Goon Ping will be able to finish off a Suicune if it does not have Toughness Cape, which is also good. So Judzagoon I just think is super, super mandatory if you're going to be playing an Arceus Inteleon deck. It's just so good. And I really just don't see any reason not to play it. Like, you have a slot, just play it. It's really great. We do have an Inteleon line. We're running a little bit of a different Inteleon line. We're playing a 4-3 and a 1-1 split of Inteleon. And the thing that might seem a little bit weird about this right off the bat is the 3 Drizzile. And honestly, I feel like this is slowly becoming standard for Shady Dealings decks ever since we got like Ultra Ball as an easier way to search out Drizzile sometimes. Even just like heavier reliance on Scoop Up Net sometimes, we can get away with 3 Drizzile. And in this deck specifically, we can get away with 3 Drizzile because we have Arceus V-Star's Starbirth to search out any cards we're going to want. So we're not going to be as super reliant on Shady Dealings as some of the other decks like, Jolteon, Dragapult, those decks that really needed it to get all the pieces they needed on their turns. And then the Inteleon line, honestly, when I first was playing this deck, I didn't play Quick Shooting Inteleon, and as I played it more, I still didn't play the quick shooting Inteleon because I thought it would be okay. And honestly, without the quick shooting Inteleon, it feels fine. Um, just quick shooting Inteleon is useful. Once again, like to just add your damage when you need it. It's just useful to have just as just a one of slot. Just once again, just like to play it. It's just one slot. It's not gonna be that big of a deal, and it will come in handy a lot. Um, Specific matchups, I already mentioned Suicune. It will come in handy, and it also will maybe become in handy in the mirror match because Arceus V that does 3 basic water energies, so it does not reduce the damage of Tornado Nova. With a Choice Belt, deals 230, and then with 2 quick shooting pings. That's not the quick shooting one. This is the quick shooting one. With 2 quick shooting pings and a Galarian Dragoon, you will be hitting that 280 number to knock out an opposing Arceus V Star. That does not have a big charm on it. So quick shooting is just, once again, like the Dragoon, useful in a bunch of different matchups and a bunch of different scenarios. The one copy of Shady Dealings Inteleon, and much like when I didn't play the quick shooting Inteleon early on, I used to play 2 Shady Dealings Inteleon, and I still think that is good. If you want to cut a card and add a second Shady Dealings Inteleon, I would be totally down for that because this card is just good. Like there in a deck where you play Water Energy already, Shady Dealings Inteleon is just a really good card. Not only do you get access to Shady Dealings to get 2 trainer cards out of your deck, you also get access to Aqua Bullet, which is a very strong attack in this deck specifically. Once again, like I mentioned, um, with being able to hit Arceus V-Star, opposing Arceus V-Star for 230 with a Choice Belt and 3 basics energies, plus a couple Inteleon pings. If your opposing Arceus V-Star goes to the bench, you can just Aqua Bullet it if you have no double turbo energy attached. And then hit it for 1 deck. Potentially finish it off or getting it mighty close to being finished off at the very least. So Aqua Bullet, especially when you play a Raihan, is just such a good attack. And like I was mentioning, I would totally be up for a second copy of this because this card is just so good in this deck. Moving on to the trainers, something I want to talk about is Collapse Stadium because I feel like this is like an underlooked card in Arceus Inteleon decks. And I think this was really popularized by Bruno Sermon. I don't know if that's how you pronounce their last name, who did win Sao Paulo regionals with the 2 Path of the Peak and 1 Collapse Stadium. And I, for that, was like really considering playing a counter stadium because there were just so many times where I was up against Jolteon, the mirror match, where I just went second and my opponent got the Starbirth before me, and then they didn't care about playing Path of the Peak, and I didn't get the Starbirth that entire game, which really sets you back, especially if you're going second already. So having Counter Stadium is, I think, mandatory because using Starbirth is super important a lot of the time, and if you're not using Starbirth, you're probably not having a great time. So Collapse Stadium to get rid of the path to be able to Starbirth against those decks that also play Path is great. I also mentioned how you can discard Crobat that you might not want on the bench. Similarly, if you have a Dunsparce you don't want there for whatever reason, you can just discard it with the Collapse Stadium. So Collapse Stadium has a lot of uses. It's also a really great stadium against Suicune Ludicolo. Because Suicune Ludicolo typically plays 0 counter stadiums. I don't know if I've ever seen a list of Suicune that doesn't has a counter stadium. Collapse Stadium will essentially just limit their damage output by 40, and 40 is a lot, especially for Suicune. 40 is going to be a lot. And so yeah, Collapse Stadium is just really useful and definitely a card that I would play for sure. Okay, trainers. The item search, we're running 3 Incense, 4 Level Ball, 4 Quick Ball, and 3 Ultra Ball. Now this might seem a little high. I've seen lists go 2 Incense, 1 Ultra Ball, and I really like the 3 Ultra Ball because I don't know about you, but I want to set up. I want to get my Arceus V down on turn 1, get that guy up and going, and Ultra Ball helps with that. We also playing 4 Level Ball, which I've seen some lists play 3 or 2. And once again, I really want to set up. I want to get my Sobbles down, so I really want the spots for these consistency cards, such as the Quick Ball, the Love Ball, the Ultra Ball. 3 Incense, I think, is kind of standard. Some lists you can play 2. I think 2's like fine. It's okay. I just, once again, wanted to go the safe route in terms of consistency, playing 3. I want to set up, so I'm just playing probably the most aggressive search engine that you can get away with in this deck. Because if you want to go like 4th Ultra Ball and 4th Incense, you're getting a little tight on space. I think there might be like 1 or 2 cuttable cards in here. If you really want to squeeze in those extra consistency cards, you can. But this has felt fine in the tournaments that I played it in. So I'm just going to keep rolling with it. I already mentioned the Pal Pad, how good it is for getting back all your one of supporters that are useful in different situations. Um, so yeah, Pal Pad. Scoop Up Net. Honestly, Scoop Up Net is probably my 61st card. To be totally honest, Scoop Up Net, I think that especially in this deck, Scuba Net is just so good. Um, because you want to be able to keep the flow of your attackers going, keep the flow of your supporters that you want to play going, and Scuba Net just helps you do that. It also lets you pull off more aggressive, quick shooting plays in the matchup that is relevant. So Scuba Net is it's just so good. And a third one is definitely my 61st card. There's just so many uses for Scuba Net with the Inteleon engine, the Zutsugoon, Scuba Netting a Dunsparce versus Lycanroc VMAX, because Lycanroc VMAX can just hit the Dunsparce for 30 damage if it doesn't like do like what's the first attack called? Like Hunting Claw to just instantly knock it out. If it doesn't have a big charm on it, you can just Scoop Net it and put it back on the bench, and it doesn't have any more damage counters on it. So we'll survive another like I don't remember what Lycanroc second attack is called. Anyway, so we'll survive another Lycanroc second attack. That's what they decided to go for. 2 Path to the Peak. I was originally playing 3 Path to the Peak, 1 Collapse Stadium, and then Bruno's list came out, so I played 2. I was like, okay, I'll give it a go. It's fine. Play 2. You don't need 3 really. Nothing much more to say. You really need Path to the Peak this deck versus Mew, which I feel like is one of the only reasons to potentially play a third one. Maybe if you like prize one against Mew, you're really worried about that. You could play the third one, but 2 has felt perfectly fine to me. I don't feel like I lost any games because I didn't have a third Path to the Peak. If your opponent is playing you and they counter 2 Path to the Peaks, they're winning that game already. By the time you get a third one out, they'll either have drawn most, if not almost completely all of their deck. They will probably have a counter stadium ready to go, or just a Crown and Mac to grab that out the deck. So yeah, 2 Path to the Peak, it's felt fine. And now moving on to the wacky supporters and all their different uses. Starting off with 2 Boss, I already mentioned how this is potentially a card that I would add a third of. But you know, 2 Boss with the Pal Pad, it's gonna cut it in a lot of matchups. But yeah, nothing much more to say here. Boss is just a good card. Period. Now let's see what we got next. Sharon's Care. This card, it's just good. There's nothing really more to say. Sharon's Care is just a good card. Being able to put the Arceus V-Star back in your hand after it's been hit by an opposing Arceus V-Star. Sharon's Care is really important in the mirror match because you really need to just out heal your opponent. And tempo is super important in the mirror match as well. So if you can out heal your opponent, you're out tempoing them, and you're getting more hits that will stick than they are. So managing your Sharon's Care as well as your Pal Pad in the mirror is important. So that's just yeah, Sharon's Care. Just once again, like the rest of the deck, like Scuba Nets, all the consistency cards we played. Sharon's Care is just a good card, and once again, something that I would definitely not go without in this deck. Now, on to probably the weirdest supporter in this list. That is going to be the Clara. And Clara is being played in Arceus decks currently, just not the version with Water Energy. Clara is typically being played in the version with Baby Galarian Moltres. Um, and I initially added Clara as a way to get back Dunsparce as well as Manaphy. I had this in here at one point. I played Clara to get back those, and the reason I played Clara over an Ordinary Rod, and I've gotten this question a bit, like a fair bit, why are you playing Clara over Ordinary Rod? It's because it can be Palpated back into the deck to reuse it again, to get back those Pokemon again, potentially. So, um, decks don't want to snipe your Dunsparce like Ravishark or Urshifu. You're going to need to get back that Dunsparce on the turn that they knock out your Dunsparce usually, and Clara will help you do that. Um, and yeah, like I mentioned, you can just get it back with Palpad, which is the main reason that I'm playing the Clara. But I tried that out in the tournament with the Dunsparce and Manaphy, and I barely, if not used it at all to get back the Dunsparce or Manaphy. I used it a whole ton more to just, after an Arceus V-Star was knocked out, use it to get back an Arceus V-Star and an Energy to just, once again, keep that flowing of attackers. Um, and that, I think, is the biggest strength of the Clara, is being able to get back an Arceus V-Star, um, as well as an Energy to just keep that flow of attacks going. Say maybe you prize a couple Water Energy, you only get to accelerate 2-on-2 benefit Arceus V with a Trinity Nova. You can just clear out the V-Star and the Water Energy back and attach it. Now you have 3 energy as well as an Arceus V-Star to go along with that. So you can keep the stream of attacks going. Also useful if you have to like discard a whole bunch of like Drizzles or Inteleon early, you can use the Clara like mid game to get them back, so that in the future turns you can get what you need. One copy of Marnie. This is something I potentially would add a second of if you really want it. If you really want to lean maybe a little bit more into that like disruption route of the deck, you can. But this is just another card that's like felt fine as a one of, and I haven't felt like I've been needing to use it like super duper often that I maybe would want a second, but it's definitely a consideration if you want to add that to the deck. One copy of Melanie. Once again, just another solid supporter card that will help you keep the attackers going. It's also useful if you don't get the attachment down turn one. You can do like Drizzile, Shady Dealing, Starworth combos to get the Water Energy and the Discard Pal to Melanie, and get the attack off turn 2 even if you don't manage to get energy down turn 1. So it's also just useful for that. I was at one point running the second Melanie over the Raihan, and I think Raihan is just better as instead of the second Melanie because you can Raihan to Inteleon the deck with that quickly and easily. You can also just like if you go second and you don't have a great opening hand and Salvo gets knocked out, you can just like Raihan an energy onto your Arceus and search for the exact card you're going to want to try and get an attack off and stabilize after that knockout. So yeah, Melanie, research. I'm not going to say too much about this. It's just a good card. Raihan, I already talked about that guy. And then Sydney, probably the second most like spicy supporter in the list behind Clara. And this was originally played by like Isaiah Bradner, Xander Perot, Rahul Reddy, Sam Chen, all them at Salt Lake City. And the idea behind that is that you can play versus Mew, you can play Path to the Peak, and then play Sydney. And I'm not surprised any of you don't know what this does. Your opponent reveals their hand, discard up to 2, and then sorry. Also, let me just I don't know if you can see this. Let me just a couple buttons here. Sorry about this little delay. All right. So opponent reveals their hand, discard up to 2, and then a combination of Pokemon tool cards, special energy, and stadium cards from it. So you can also just Path to Peak, discard all their stadium cards, and potentially like a fusion energy to limit their 1-hit KO options with Meloetta. And yeah, you can just do that. And suddenly they have no way to replace their Path to Peak because you discarded their stadium cards from their hand, which is going to be super strong versus Mew because I mentioned that the only way that you're going to be beating Mew is if you get a Path to Peak to stick, and Sydney will help you get that Path to the Peak to stick to win that matchup. Now, on to the tool cards that you play. We're running 2 copies of Big Charm, and this is useful against Mew because it requires them an extra damage modifier to take a knockout on you. If they have a double turbo energy on their Mew, they're going to need 4 modifiers. So that's either like a choice belt on 3 power tablets or all 4 power tablets so they don't have a choice belt attached in order to get a knockout on your Arceus V because Arceus V Star. Arceus V Star with a Big Charm has 310 HP, and a 2-prizer with VMAX level HP that 2-shots anything in the game also has a crazy ability that lets you set up consistently. That is just good in general and scary for decks to deal with. Just a 2-prizer with 3-prizer HP in general is just scary for some decks to deal with. Um, so Big Charm is just a great card. Also useful in the mirror match, being able to attach a Big Charm to an Arceus V in the mirror match, give it 250 HP, and now your opponent can't use like Zigzagoon, Boss, and Choice Belt to be able to take a knockout on that. And that is honestly a really big part of the mirror match is like making sure your opponent can't take any knockouts that would like really put them ahead. And I'll talk about that a little bit in the matchup portion of this video. I'm hopefully going to do a little bit portion about the matchups of Arceus Inteleon, just like a little bit about each one. Choice Belt is, I've already mentioned this a couple times, it's just a good card. There's no reason not to play one of it in pretty much almost every deck. There's no deck I can really think of that would not want to play at least one Choice Belt. So we're playing one of those. You honestly, when I first picked up this deck, I was like, I don't know about the one Choice Belt. 2 feels like it would be a little bit safer, and honestly, 1 is felt completely fine. I don't think you need to go any higher than 1. 1 feels great to me. And energy, 4 double turbo, which is standard, and 5 water energy, which is a little bit low, but do keep in mind we are running the Clara as well as Raihan and Melanie to get back water energies, so we'll have pretty steady access to water energy when we need it. Okay, that is the deck profile part of this video, just going over the cards and their general uses in the deck. And now I want to go over matchups a little bit, just like a little bit about each matchup. Starting with the obvious one, Mew. I already talked about this one a little bit, about how locking a Path to Peak and play with Sydney and just using Path to Peak and getting it to stick in general is going to be the main, if not only way to beat Mew. There is no other great way, unfortunately. And just Sydney plus Path to Peak plus just sitting a giant Arceus with 310 HP in the discard pile is usually going to be your Owl versus Mew. And as long as you can get like a not bad setup and you're not completely demolished by Meloetta, it should work pretty consistently. I feel like something that's important about the Mew matchup is getting rid of Fusion Energy. Having an option where if they just have one Fusion Energy play, they can just Elisa Sparkle and attach Fusion Energy, and they're dishing out 280 with Lodia's Echo. So getting rid of Fusion Energy by taking Knockout or playing Sydney is going to be really important because just them having that like almost instant 1-kill option on an Arceus is really scary. So if you can, try and get rid of that option for them as soon as possible, because that is just where they can really take over if they manage to get that off. And yeah, that's about a little bit about Mew. The mirror is pretty deep and pretty interesting too. If you know how to play the mirror, it is pretty fun. And if both players are playing it right and drawing well, it can take a little bit of time too. So you do have to manage time kind of well again in the mirror match. Usually when I go into the mirror match, the first thing I look for, and the immediate first thing I look for, especially or not especially, only in an open deckless tournament, are a couple things. A, do they play Galarian Zigzagoon? B, how many Charon's Care do they play? And C, do they play a Palpad? If at all, most lists are playing a Palpad. Oh, and I also potentially look for a counter stadium um, for a Path to the Peak. Are they running their own counter stadium as well? Those are like the 3 or 4 main things I do look for. Zigzagoon, I think, is the most important out of all of those, because if they play a Zigzagoon and they do get to go first, there is that possibility that they can capitalize on that by using a Boss and Choice Belt turn 2 to knock out your Arceus V. And if they do that, you are in a very bad spot. So if they just don't play the Galarian Zigzagoon and aren't giving themselves that option at all, that is just great for you. I already mentioned how I think Zigzagoon is just really important and really good. I just there's so many merits to the slot to play it, but some lists still aren't playing it, so you can capitalize on that in terms of your play, in terms of what plays you make, stuff like that. The Charon's Care, I already mentioned how sometimes later in the game, in the mirror, Charon's Care battles can be what will decide the game. Who has access to more Charon's Care? Um, I feel like most lists are playing one Charon's Care and a Palpad. Some will play two. Um, and I still, even though the mirror is a pretty popular matchup, I still think one Charon's Care and one Palpad is best because there aren't that many other matchups that Charon's Care is going to be useful in. Like off the top of my head, maybe like Dark Box. Maybe Dark Box will be useful. Maybe Dark Box without Arceus will be useful in. What other matchups? Like I don't even know if Ice Rider's a deck. Ice Rider potentially, if that's a thing you're worried about for some reason. Malamar is also kind of useful because Malamar, a lot of what will decks try to do versus Malamar is just early game. Here's a giant Pokemon that you kind of have a tough time KOing if you yourself KO the right things by bossing around and stuff like that. Just having a giant thing that can be healed with Charon's Care versus Malamar is also nice. So yeah, that's just a little bit like the one Charon's Care. Back to Mirror, I got a little sidetracked there. Charon's Care will just be able to try and out your opponent, also conserving resources, like being able to Charon's Care into like an Inteleon and then take those energy from the Arceus and attach them to an Inteleon to attack with Aqua Bullet is good as well. Is there anything else about the mirror? Like I already mentioned, how Big Charm is good versus the mirror to try and keep those Arceuses alive because you really don't want them to get like a turn ahead of you in terms of attacks because almost always in the mirror match, unless you're getting like Inteleon, Quick Shooting Ping, Zgoon, Choice Belt stuff in there, Arceus V-Stars in the mirror match will be getting two-shotted. And if your opponent just takes the same amount of prizes that they take for a knockout on an Arceus V-Star with just one attack instead of two, that's putting you in kind of a bad spot because that essentially gives you one less turn to try and win the game. Especially if they do get rid of a couple energy along with it, that can be kind of rough. So Big Charms are good for keeping those Arceus V alive. So managing your Big Charms in the rematch is also important. Collapse Stadium can be potentially backbreaking if they're not expecting it. If they do have a large bench, and they don't have their Crobat, like Zigzagoon, any of these Pokemon that they don't really mind discarding, Collapse Stadium can be kind of annoying to that. Yeah, so that's a little bit about the mirror match, and then I think like the other deck, like the third of like the main titans of the format right now, Malamar. Honestly, I think you will beat a suboptimal Malamar player pretty often for simply for this one play, which is going to be Aqua Bullet to knock out a Malamar and hit a benched NK for 20, as well as Quick Shooting on that benched NK to bring it up to 40, and Zigzagoon to hit it for 50. So against a suboptimal Malamar player who won't bench 3 NK or not bench a Manaphy if they do play it, Aqua Bullet will be able to take a knockout on an NK as well as a Malamar. And the combination of you getting 2 prize cards as well as potentially removing all of their attackers from the board against an unsuspecting Malamar player will pretty much just win you the game there straight up because you're just going to be so ahead. 3 prizes at worst ahead of them, which is just massive. And Malamar players, especially since you're doing this all with like a 1 prizer, Malamar will not usually be able to come back from that. I also mentioned how the Charon's Care, the big thing that you put up there early game is great. Attacking with Waterfall is not bad. If you do get a couple quick shootings in there as well, since it's doing pings, you can KO a Malamar with Waterfall if you really have to attack with a 1 prizer. Inteleon quick shooting is an attacking option along with that other shady dealings Inteleon. Collapse Stadium is super good versus Malamar because there's like an optimal board state for Malamar, and it's double NK, Remoraid / Octillery, and then three Sobbles slash Dressels. To just that is like the best board state that a Malamar player can ask for is the triple Shady Guys, the Octillery slash Remoraid, and then the NK Malamar. That is the board state that I feel like they'll usually be going for. So being able to limit that in any way, shape, or form with Collapse Stadium is great. Any other matchups? Jolteon, I think, this is a little bit of a hot take, but I think Jolteon is actually kind of favored, and you do have to play it right, though. And Jolteon is going to be, once again, a matchup very, very based around the Charon's Care. Because healing an Arceus V-Star that will usually get 3-shot is really, really good. And after you like Sharon's Care, like an Arceus that usually has like 200 damage on it, and you go up to another one, evolve that one, I think this is the big thing that some people are missing. Do not bench that Arceus V until like 1 or 2 turns, because if you have nothing else on your bench, say they've already knocked out your Sobbles, and you do want to limit your Sobbles as well. I'll get to that after I finish talking about Sharon's Care. If you don't have anything on the bench, they're just hitting 100 damage, which kind of sucks. Hitting for 100 damage is just like bad. So Sharon's Care, bring that thing up, don't bench it again, and then wait a couple turns until you absolutely have to bench it to reattach to it with the Trini Nova to absolutely limit the damage to an absolute minimum 100 damage. That's you can. Also versus Jolteon, being able, or no, not being able, limiting your Sobble on your bench as well, because the prize race that Jolteon is going to be going for, if you're not playing the matchup optimally, is going to be 4 1-prizers and a 2-prizer, or two 2-prizers as well as a couple 2-prizers. And if you bench 2 1-prizers, they'll be knocking those out pretty much all the time. But that will cause them to make a compromise. And that compromise is you are not hitting my other benched Arceus V I'm setting up here. So now I will be able to Challenge Care my active into a fresh Arceus, which is going to be really, really good for Jolteon, or not for Jolteon, for you, because now you have an Arceus up there with 0 damage. Yeah, just Arceus up there with 0 damage, which on a Pokemon that takes like 3 turns to knock out from Jolteon is just good. You're just going to be getting like 2 or 3 free hits. And this is where Cheryl comes in. Cheryl at least tries to halt all these plans by trying to out-heal the Arceus player. But since Jolteon will be 3-shotting your Arceus, if you manage your Charon's Care, potentially even your Pal Pad, your Collapse Stadium, Counter Stadium is important. If you Shady Dealings for this guy and then not play him down, you force a Jolteon player to either Marnie you to get rid of the Stadium out so you can't Starbirth like Charon's Care, or they will just Cheryl, and if they Cheryl you, then you can just put the Collapse Stadium and Starbirth for whatever you're going to need. So that's another thing, like getting a Collapse Stadium preemptively, not playing it down, also forces your opponent to make a compromise to either Cheryl or play the Marnie. Yeah, that's just like a little bit about the Jolteon matchup. That one is like a little bit hard to explain. It's really hard to explain it without like actually being there. But I think that if you play Jolteon correctly, like just the things, if you play Jolteon correctly, it is not a horrible matchup, and it's definitely winnable. Other matchups should I talk about? Gengar. I know that like Rahul Reddy talked a little bit about this on one of his videos, I think, where he thought the Gengar matchup was bring up the barrel, knock it out, so they have a hard time drawing, especially if you have their Path of Peak in play. For the most part, yeah, I do agree with that, but sometimes I think you are going to have to deal with the Gengar instead of going for the barrel, because it's just such a big threat. Also, limiting your opponent's hand with Marnie, limiting your opponent's hand with Marnie in the Gengar matchup is also important, because Then, especially if you path them, I have a hard time drawing out of it because Gengar is not the most consistent deck in the world. So if you like boss knock out the barrel and then like Marnie next turn, that could potentially be really really backbreaking for Gengar. But yeah, just make sure to like big charm your Arceuses, make them as tough to knock out as possible. Path peak strategically. Make sure you got that collapse stadium in the back ready to go in order to get rid of the Gengar's path of the peak, so you can Starbirth when you want to early game if you do really have to. So that's like about the Gengar matchup. What other matchups are there? I don't think there's any more I really want to talk about. I think this video is getting pretty long. Um, but yeah, that's gonna do it for this, I think, pretty long video. Explaining Arceus Inteleon, explaining this list and the matchups. Hopefully you just got a good idea of this deck, potentially maybe how to play it and its matchups. This is the deck I think is the best in the game. I try to play what I think is the best deck in the game. So here I am playing this deck. But that's gonna do it for the video. Hope you guys liked it. If you guys did, don't forget to subscribe. I usually do like future format stuff, but I do the occasional PTCGO video on decks that I'm being successful with, decks I think are good, decks I think are interesting, decks I think are fun, just all things Pokemon TCG. So yeah, if you want to see that, don't forget to subscribe. But that'll be it.